So, I want to talk to y'all about Phase 4 of the MCU. I've discussed this in the past, but I wanted to go more in depth because more and more now I'm starting to notice that people are kind of seeing things from my perspective when it comes to what they've been doing with Phase 4 of the MCU. And what do I mean by that? So, a few weeks ago, I did a video where I discussed why I have not watched Moon Knight yet. And obviously, it's not anything personal against that show or anything I've heard. I've actually been avoiding people's opinions on that show purposely. Same thing with Miss Marvel. Now, I love Oscar Isaac. He's a great actor, very talented performer, and I do want to see how he handles that character, but I haven't watched it yet. And more, I'm seeing people kind of begin to slowly disconnect from the MCU. And I think the real problem, and it's something that needs to be discussed and evaluated, is that they're actually putting out too much content, if you ask me. They used to do 2 movies a year, and that was fine. Now we're up to 3 movies a year, which I actually thought worked. One in like the springtime, one in the summer, one in the fall or the winter. I think that's fine. But now we're getting to the point where we have 3 movies a year, and we have multiple TV shows, multiple Disney Plus shows, starting off with WandaVision, going to the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, which goes into Loki, and then, of course, What If, which is canonical to the MCU, Hawkeye, and so the more of these shows come out, you have to understand the rule of diminishing returns. The longer something is around, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Marvel, a video game franchise, a comic book, a TV show. It does not matter what we're talking about. The longer something is out, the higher the probability is of it to go bad, of it to begin to suck. If The Simpsons had ended at season 10 or maybe season 12, it would have been considered the greatest cartoon of all time. But it kept going, and because of that, the show kind of began to fall off real hard after season 10, and now those last 15 seasons are really frowned upon by Simpsons fans, including myself. I have the first 10 seasons on DVD, and I also watch them on Disney Plus whenever I can, but it's not like I watch any of the new stuff because that show jumped the shark a long time ago. It's just not funny to me anymore. I don't like the new look of it. It just does not work for me. And the longer a show goes on, the higher chance it is of it jumping the shark, right? Literally. Not literally, but you know what I mean. When you jump the shark, when you go too long. And with the MCU, even though they're different shows, it's all part of one big story. So, starting with Hawkeye, I started to notice that I began to lose interest in the MCU because I didn't like what they did with Hawkeye. And I've talked about this before. And I don't like what they did there along with other things. Black Widow and Eternals also started, not too great. And to me, those movies were not the best way to start Phase 4. Now, with that being said, I love Spider-Man No Way Home, but that was also a Sony project, relied on a ton of nostalgia, a ton of cameos and things like that, and it was a really well-made movie, well-scripted, just a great, great, great fun time, made a ton of money. But the rest of the MCU movies have been, I would say somewhat lackluster. I like Doctor Strange 2's story, but they left a lot to be desired. Same thing with Thor, Love and Thunder. I don't hate these movies, but they definitely feel like they are, a bit lower, a step lower than their predecessors. On top of that, one of the things that made the old MCU, Phase 1, 2, and 3 so good, especially Phase 1 and Phase 3, is that each movie kind of built upon the previous one. The post-credit scene for each movie would tease a movie coming up later or a movie coming up next. Now, with this Phase 4, we're seeing teases for films that might not come out for 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, we've seen the post-credit scene of something like Eternals, right, where Thane gets introduced. Like, when is that story going to continue? We have no idea. We also saw the Sword in the post-credit scene there as well with Blade. And so they're doing the thing where they tease you, but right now there's no definitive timetable as of the recording of this video of when these stories are going to play out. And I feel like there's too many stories that are left open-ended. There's too many stories that I think are right now going on at once. And granted, for a comic book, the comics did this. They definitely did, right? Comics. But it's different because with a comic book, you have new issues coming out every month, so you can keep up with the crossovers and the major storylines. With this, we have to wait years to see where this storyline goes. And they have so many open angles right now, so many open storylines. The thing with the Celestials and the Eternals, when's that going to get blown off? You know, we have Hercules coming to Earth. There's not even another Thor movie announced yet. I'm sure there will be, but I mean, that's weird. Then you've got, you know, the Kingpin arrives, gets cucked, if I'm being honest. You know, we have rumors of a show with Echo that I don't really care about. We have Daredevil being rumored. There's a lot of things going on right now that are sort of teasing the future, but it does feel directionless, and people have talked about this. I saw them. In fact, I have a friend who was 100% in on the MCU, even more than I was. He saw all the MCU films multiple times, and even he's starting to think, like, okay, where is this going? Are we going to have a big overarching villain like we had Thanos? One of the things I loved about Phase 1, 2, and 3 is that Thanos was in the background. Granted, he wasn't in every movie. He was, the threat of him doing the invasion to get the stones was, you know, concocted movie after movie. Old Age of Ultron had it. Guardians of the Galaxy had it. He was in those films. The slow build. Thor Ragnarok had it, you know, to his arrival. With these films, we don't know who the main antagonist is going to be for Phase 4, and it just feels like a bunch of stories that are only interconnected because they take place in the same universe. And while that's cool, I think there is a semblance of burnout because, and I'll tell you why, because when we see these TV shows, we know subconsciously that these storylines are not going to get payoffs until later. Look at Kang the Conqueror. Low-key Season 1, we get introduced to Kang the Conqueror. He's going to be a major villain in the Ant-Man film, and that's at least good to know. But there's been rumors that Kang is going to be the main villain of MCU Phase 4, but we haven't seen him enough to actually think that. Granted, they have time to introduce him. It just feels like with Thanos, starting with Avengers, he was already coming. Like, it was a slow burn. We knew it was inevitable, and it did happen. With the MCU Phase 4, it's almost like you need like a roadmap to keep track of everything. I feel like in the future, when we get to Phase 5 or even later movies in Phase 4, they're going to bring up events that happened in other movies in Phase 4 that we're not going to even remember or not find to be that interesting. You know, and so to me, I think they're putting out way too much content. I think there is such thing as too much content. I think I'm definitely burnt out. And I want to watch Moon Knight. I want to watch that and Miss Marvel. But when I turn on my Disney Plus and I go to it and I see, you know, how many minutes each episode is and how long they are, I'm just like, okay, do I really want to dedicate my time to watching this now when I know that it's going to only have a cliffhanger that might not even get paid off? Or maybe it won't have a cliffhanger. Maybe it will be a great show when I can spend my time doing something else, like playing a video game that I can control what I do and get to the end of. You know, there's different things. And nowadays we live in a world where things are distracting us all the time. So I do think the MCU really needs to reassess how they do things and slow it down, because to me it just feels like there's too much content and not enough of a standard solid direction. There's also rumors and movies get postponed and all kinds of things occur, and it doesn't feel as good as it used to. They're definitely trying new things and I commend them for that, but it does not have the same feel that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had for the first 3 phases. Even Phase 2, that has a couple of my least favorite films like Iron Man 3 and Thor 2, you had Guardians of the Galaxy, and, you know, Age of Ultron was probably not as good as the first Avengers, but I think I used to love it, and then I kind of disliked it for a bit, and then now I kind of like it again. You know what I mean? Like, time has kind of served that movie well, because James Spader is great in it. Obviously, we have the whole thing with Wanda's accent coming in and out, which I find very funny. It reminds me of the first Star Wars movie with Princess Leia doing the same thing. I don't know what Carrie Fisher was smoking that day, but probably something good. You know, and then we have, you know, Elizabeth Olsen doing the same thing where she doesn't even know whether or not she wants to have an accent. You know, that's funny to me. But, you know, you had the charisma, and that's something else, is that with Phase 1, 2, and 3, you had the incredible charisma of Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. They really carried those 3 phases. Now we still have Chris Hemsworth, we still have Mark Ruffalo, and those are great actors, but there was something really special about Iron Man and Captain America in this franchise. Something very special. You have to remember, prior to the MCU, Iron Man was not a top level character for Marvel. Like, I remember vividly that, you know, you have your Spider-Mans, your X-Men's, your Hulk, your Captain America. Iron Man was never really an A-lister, at least not with me and my friend group. He was cool, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't like a tippy-top superhero. And I think the MCU made him really important. Same thing with the Civil War comic book storyline, which I thought was great, and really developed that Iron Man character. But I don't know, it just feels... I am less interested in the MCU now than I ever have been in the past. And I think a lot of it does have to do with just the overabundance of content. You know, and on top of that, I'm into other things like Star Wars, and they're doing like what, you know, 2, maybe 3 shows a year. That's watchable, but sometimes when you have a show and you have too much content, I check out. For example, The Bad Batch. I was reviewing every episode here on World of Geekdom, and then I just decided not to because I lost interest. Not because the show sucked, but because there were other things that I was more into at that time that took up my time. So I would always tell myself, okay, well, I'll watch 2 episodes in a row to catch up, but I never do it. Next week, okay, well, I'll watch 3 episodes. I'll watch 4 episodes. Next thing you know, you're missing the entire second half of the season or more than that, and you're like, fuck it. Like, that's honestly how I feel with some of these shows. And, you know, Marvel and Disney, Marvel and Star Wars are 2 very important things with Disney, on top of, like, you know, other stuff that's part of the brand, not just the original characters, but also all the Pixar stuff. But I just feel like there's a lot of things going on. Plus, I'm usually very busy with work, you know, YouTube stuff, Dragon Ball stuff on my main channel and stuff on this channel. And it just becomes more of a chore to sit there and watch these shows than it would be if there were less of them. You know what I mean? It makes them more special. That's only my thoughts. Obviously, they have contracts to fill out and money to make. I get it. But to me, it just, MCU Phase 4 really does feel like a step down. Maybe not as bad as Phase 2, but at least Phase 2 had Robert Downey and Chris Evans alongside the other heroes. This one just feels, I don't know, just a step down. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. What do you think about all this, man? Am I making sense to you? Do you agree? Let me know. Subscribe if you're new. Thank you. Have a great day, and I'll talk to y'all very soon. Take care.